From Smithville to Shawnee Mission, you're listening to Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio.
It's our first conversation of 2026, and it is with Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas here on KCMO Talk Radio. Mr. Mayor, good morning. Happy New Year. Thanks for being on the show as always.
It is great to be back. Happy New Year. It is starting off pretty strong.
I would say so. Can you believe, by the way, this is our last full year having these conversations with you as the mayor for the entire 12 months. How's that make you feel?
You know what? It makes me very sad, but I think it creates a great opportunity for KCMO Talk Radio, a new sponsored segment each week so everybody can get good, common sense, moderate Democratic takes. I think the public will love it.
Okay, well, I'll get them on that. So let's start with a moderate Democratic take. If you've got one, I have not seen you publicly comment on what happened yesterday in Minneapolis. What is your response to what took place there between a woman who had ties to Kansas City, apparently lived here for a period of time a couple of years ago, and was shot and killed by an ICE agent yesterday?
You know, I think I'm going to focus, and I may put something out a little bit later, but I'm going to focus on the loss of life. Look, it's a tragedy, full stop. I have been a police commissioner now for almost 7 years. Anytime there's a loss of life, it is something that we grieve about and that we regret. And I think that could at least be one unifying central message. I look forward to a full investigation from the authorities, both the state authorities in Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis Police Department. I understand the FBI is looking at it as well. I think it is far too early for, and I saw a statement from the Secretary of Homeland Security who called the Victims Act an act of domestic terrorism. Tragically, I've seen the video, many of you have as well, but I'm just going to focus on the loss of life. And, and I would just hope, and I say this as somebody who spends a lot of time with local law enforcement. They work very hard in my city to not go out and act like cowboys, to not have these types of incidents, and you never want something to end like that. I hope that's something that's reaffirmed of all of our federal agents, including these ICE agents all around America.
From a pure leadership perspective, I mean, I know that you mayors interact and see each other. This guy up there, Jacob Fry, I mean, he's a piece of work no matter which side you're on. Here's part of what he said yesterday. And just from a pure mayoral leadership perspective, I want to get your response to what he said here.
To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
Is that at all helpful, Mr. Mayor, right now?
I know Jacob. I've spent time with him. We've broken bread and actually been on a few panels together over the years. He's had a lot come his way. From George Floyd to this incident, it seems like a whole lot of things are happening in Minneapolis lately. There was a school shooting not that long ago as well. I'm not going to stand in the shoes of another mayor and see how they'll react. I know how I would. I have not typically used that type of language, at least in terms of an incident that has this level of heightened tensions. I think that's how I would proceed, but I'll leave it to the people of Minneapolis, Mayor Fry and others to do it. But you know what? It's a community that was aggravated in pain. Someone who you don't give credit to a lot, perhaps, is Governor Tim Walz, who I did see a posting that told everybody to make sure that they remain calm, that they don't create more of an incident and more concerns in Minneapolis. And I stand with the governor in terms of agreeing to that.
Mayor Quinton Lucas is joining us on KCMO. Let's bring it back to Kansas City, Mr. Mayor. One of the positive trends out of last year, I know it's not where the goals are right now when it comes to the homicides, but they are continuing to come down the last couple of years. But there was this, I saw this issue, no one died, but I did see that there was a shooting at 31st and Brooklyn the other night at a gas station. There are some considerations for trying to figure out how to prevent these things ahead of time from happening at some of these locations. And you're looking at maybe ordinances that address drug and alcohol sales at gas stations. What is the goal there, and how would that actually be implemented?
Yeah, very simply. I mean, look, Kansas City, I was talking to some cops about this yesterday. Kansas City is not an inherently violent city. And you go to all these places and you see kind of calm in some places, but then you recognize where a lot of the incidents occur. And a lot of those, and we talked about parking lots over the summer and people went all types of crazy about it, but you have a lot of issues at some of our gas stations and others. Some of it relates to, single serve liquor sales. So people walking around with 40s, they get drunk, and some of them, they just stand outside all day, loiter. You have all types types of behavior that relates to that. You get fights, you get shootings sometimes, you get other concerns. Same thing increasingly with a lot of these gas station drugs that you have sold. And I know there is a world of disagreement, but I met yesterday with a woman, a mother who lost a son, who became incredibly addicted to that, who said this was 1,000 times worse than when he was addicted to opioids. Her son is no longer here. That's something you're getting at a gas station in Kansas City. And so what we're trying to say is, look, maybe you can get all the 40s and all the kratom and everything else that you want in some other jurisdiction, and maybe they can deal with all of that. But in Kansas City, you don't need to. And I think that's the sort of legislation that we're looking to. I think it's going to be important for us. And frankly, I think it'll make us safer. So somebody who's going to a corner store, somebody who's picking up and filling up some gas can be safe, and you don't have the types of incidents that you all have to report regularly in Kansas City that we have all known for way too many years.
Now, speaking of when it comes to law enforcement and, of course, trying to make sure that you get the bad guys off the streets and you have the right ordinances in place, the World Cup's a few months away. This temporary jail, I saw, is going to cost an extra $4 million. So we're up to $26 million on the temporary jail project. I think that there's probably two schools of thought here. One, long overdue, it's great. But that's a hefty price tag for something that's really for 8 weeks. So is there some way to use this beyond the World Cup? Is that part of the plan to justify the cost here?
The short answer is absolutely yes. I think that City Council has largely discussed the fact that you can convert what is being built as a modular facility into something that becomes more permanent long-term. And I think that it would be a waste of taxpayer funds if not only we didn't evaluate that, but I think we've done sufficient evaluation to lay out a pathway for that. I mean, one thing I appreciate about you, Pete, and you always do this, which is that, and frankly, that's what I grew up thinking conservatives do, is you ask questions about, what the taxpayers are actually spending at the end of the day. And, this modular jail discussion came up because a bunch of people said, hey, yeah, you can get $5 million jail from a trailer in Springfield and it's, going to work. And I think some of us had skepticism from the jump, but we all saw that wasn't true. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have funds already appropriated to redo the top floor of KCPD headquarters. We transferred these funds to this. This, however, presents us with a strong opportunity, which is that you've got the land, right? You're already building the structure. And frankly, you got to have a structure, even if it's temporary, that won't get blown over by a tornado, right? That has heating and cooling, that has all the things that are necessary to it. So I actually think what will be important for Kansas City taxpayers is that we say, how do we make this into something permanent, which gives us a faster delivery on a permanent facility for the city of Kansas City, frankly addresses our public safety goals and gets us to move beyond at least this part of the detention conversation that Kansas City has been in for the last several years, and I think reversing a mistake that was made by predecessors of mine, destroying the municipal farm in 2009 and closing the 8th floor detention headquarters in 2015, which prior to that had been open for 75 years.
Now, did you vote to close that in 2015, though, when you were on the city council?
I did not. That was I believe it was a KCPD decision that had been made previous to that. Granted, all the police buildings are city-owned facilities, so there was probably some council ordinance, but it related to the renovations at the police headquarters and this view that I think PD at the time, the then chief, Stero Forte, wanted to get out of the detention business. I understand that point. I think that, however, we've created a few more challenges over the past several years. And looking forward, I hope we all have a chance to move ahead. I have a great relationship with now Sheriff Forte, who I think is doing a good job as we lay out the permanent facility in Jackson County. But, things change over the years. That's what happens. But hopefully we get addressed all these detention issues now.
Mayor Lucas is here on KCMO, our first conversation of the new year on 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. All right, I can't start off a New Year conversation without really picking up where we left off, and that's talking about these stadiums because, well, it's still a part of the conversation, whether we like it or not. The Royals, where have the city of Kansas City's conversations been with the Royals, as it looks like Kansas yesterday announced from Speaker of the House Dan Hawkins that they're done negotiating with the Royals? That maybe leaves them on the Missouri side. The question is Kansas City going to stay the home of the Royals?
Well, look, let me tell you something. Slow and steady wins the race. And so you had Speaker Hawkins on the news yesterday, I think, giving up information about them asking for negotiations after the deadline. I am reading about a Clay County commissioner who almost wrote a jilted lover kind of letter of I'm leaving you before you leave me. It's not the sort of thing that I do. Right. And what I have said throughout this process, Kansas City, the city of Kansas City is a professional organization. We have never stopped having discussions. I have watched with interest the ups and downs and everything else. Frankly, Pete, that's happened in every other jurisdiction but ours. And by the way, we're not letting grass grow underneath our feet. We just actually have real business-like discussions with these folks, both the Royals and the Chiefs. I'm not going to tell you location. I'm not going to tell you anything new, but I will tell you these two things. One, Kansas City continues to be in robust conversations with the Kansas City Royals. What we hear one day in Kansas or one day in North Kansas City or one day and who knows where does not change what we're doing. So I've had a lot of reporters stick a microphone in my face and say, well, yeah, is Kansas done? I'm like, I don't know. And frankly, I'm going to proceed as if there's still a very viable option. There are still real estate interests who want to sell land. There are still people who want to make money. And wherever there is someone who wants to make money on a transaction by having a big old stadium on their property or next to them, this will continue. So the Speaker of the Kansas House can say what he wants, but I think there'll be real estate interests that continue to talk to the Kansas City Royals there. Same story with if there's a commissioner in Clay County or anywhere, right? I think that continues. So for Kansas City, like we tell our children, right, I'm just going to keep doing the work that we need to do. We're going to make sure we're ready to compete, and I think that will continue. And let me say something briefly about the Chiefs as well. You continue to just frankly hear more complication in connection with that deal. And we haven't talked in a little while, but probably what's most interesting to me, you heard discussion of how much better it is to deal with Kansas because you just talked to one party. But frankly, now you're seeing you got to talk to a lot more. There are a lot more questions. I think there are questions about the viability of the deal long term. And to something that Governor Kehoe said, I think several weeks ago, until the moving trucks are gone, we haven't actually closed consideration there. And so we're not spending every day of our lives working on it and all of that. But Kansas City will make sure it is a strong option if the Chiefs deal falls through. And certainly for the Kansas City Royals, I believe we are by far the best option. I've thought that for years, and I think that's kind of coming to fruition now.
Have you had any direct conversations with the Chiefs over the last 3 weeks or no?
I won't create any problems for them. I believe they have an exclusive negotiation agreement.
Got it.
There are certainly ways for things to be known in the world, but I ain't creating any problems. I don't need a tortious interference with business expectancy lawsuit from the state of Kansas.
Okay, fair enough. All right, but then here's the other thing with the Royals in particular. And you've seen, and listen, people know where I stand on this. A lot of the criticism on the Kansas side in terms of what this may ultimately mean for the taxpayer. The fear I think Missourians and Kansas Cityans should have right now is, are you guys, in an effort to try to keep the Royals because of what's happened with the Chiefs, going to basically bend over backwards for this team in a deal that's bad for the taxpayers? So I don't like doing two-part questions, but number one, how do you keep the taxpayer first and foremost in this? And number two, and I want to get number two answered first because it's a yes, no. Do you promise if they stay in Kansas City to make sure this thing somehow goes to a vote of the people?
No is the answer. And then as to the first one, I think that, and I've taken a whole lot of flack, and you've seen it and all of that. The day the Chiefs deal was announced, everybody was saying what a failure of Kansas City included, even though the Chiefs aren't even our tenant. And certainly Jackson County's had its issues over the years. And then I think as the days have gone by, people have seen fundamentally, and I think to a person, it is very hard for somebody to say that Kansas deal is fair and transparent to the taxpayer in Northeast Kansas, and particularly the taxpayer in certain jurisdictions. I think what you will see over the next several months is them trying to perhaps refashion a deal that looks like a level of fair, but it won't be. And so I think what you will have in Kansas City, Missouri, I promise this, and frankly, this is what we've discussed on the somewhat publicly discussed Chiefs deal, is that we are looking to truly do what has been described in some of the other areas. Users pay for the stadium. Users and surrounding development. And surrounding development is not 290 square miles. Surrounding development isn't the entire state of Missouri, let's say. Surrounding development is what pays for it. And to the extent that we put in any other infrastructure dollars, anything like that, there will be clarity in it. So, no, I continue to stand by the fact that I don't think we need a vote in Kansas City, Missouri. We're the biggest city in the region. And big cities and regions can do things like build stadiums. We've done that before without a vote with CPKC Stadium on the riverfront. Smaller but similar, now $1 billion development project. We do that all the time with jails, other facilities, many of which cost north of $100 million, and some of which, like a water treatment plant, will cost probably about $1.5 billion. So Kansas City can get things done. We're going to do that. We're going to be responsible to the taxpayers. We're going to tell you all about it. But what you won't see at the end is a show me bond that no one's heard about, that no one knows about, that no one has information about, that costs 2 or 3 times the cost of what you're estimating. We're going to be fair to the Royals, fair to our taxpayers, and I think this will help us get a deal done soon.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Happy New Year. Thank you again for being here, and we will talk to you next week. Have a great day.
Hey, take care, everybody.
All right, Quinton Lucas on KCMO Talk Radio. 913-408-7957. He would not promise, though, that a potential Royals Stadium deal, if in Kansas City or Jackson County, would go to a vote of the people, which kind of confirms a Kansas City Star report from the other day that says basically Kansas City is looking at ways to try to get a deal set up for the Royals that does not include the voter, because that was always one of the most appealing parts of Kansas, along with, of course, the upwards of 70% of the stadium costs being handled by the state. Interesting.